Hello, everyone, and welcome. So good to have you all here today. I'm Marisa Garver Carrera with Education Elements, and this is the process of building a graduate profile and its considerations. And we have some awesome guests with us here today, and we're going to get started. But before we get started, if you will just put your name, your role, and your district, and where you're joining us from in the chat, we would love to say hi to you. And also we will be using the chat throughout our time together for questions. So if you have any questions, please put them in there and we will make sure we capture those later in the Q&A. So again, my name is Marisa and I am with Education Elements. I am a design principal and I get to work with districts all over the country on things like building a graduate profile, strategic planning, equity work, culturally responsive practices. Before I came to Education Elements, I started my education career as a kindergarten teacher. So shout out to the lower L teachers who are here. And then I moved into coaching and teaching district leaders and educators, specifically around culturally responsive practices and rolling out district initiatives in Denver for Denver Public Schools with over 90,000 students. So really excited to have this conversation with you all today. And I also have my colleague Drew here, and I'll allow him to introduce himself.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Drew Sean, I'm an associate partner with Education Elements based out of San Francisco. So I think I'm the furthest west joining today, but I see someone else in the Pacific time zone from Las Vegas. So shout out to Kim. Started my education career in Washington, D.C., worked for D.C. Public Schools, moved over to Detroit to found a school of my own, and then ended up at Education Elements after that. So have crisscrossed the country working with, I guess, maybe, I don't think hundreds of districts is accurate, but at least dozens of districts on a number of different initiatives, from strategic planning to competency-based learning, new school design, and everything in between. So fortunate to bring perspectives from New York to Hawaii and everywhere in between, and really excited to dig into one of my favorite topics, which is developing a graduate profile. So excited to learn with you all, hear from our guest panelists, and also share a little bit more about the work that Education Elements does. So we are an organization that believes that schools grow when people grow. We're very much about building the capacity of individuals to facilitate change management and to really make schools places where leaders love to lead, students love to learn, and teachers love to teach. And like I said, we have a wide reach from the tip of Maine all the way to Hawaii. We've worked with districts all over the place. So we have lots of stories, lots of context, and lots of lessons learned from all of those opportunities we've had to work with our school and district partners from coast to coast. So we're grateful to be able to share those perspectives with you all and fold those into the conversation today. And speaking of geography, we're really zooming in on the Northeast today, and we're really excited to introduce our two panelists to you all that we've had the great fortune of working with on developing a graduate profile. So I'll introduce Dr. Laura Green. I had the pleasure of working with her in Stamford Public Schools. She's the coordinator of alternative education there at Anchor. And I'm really excited to share her journey and hear more from her about her process of developing a graduate profile.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today, and I'm really excited to be able to share the work that we've done with Education Elements, Portrait of a Graduate, and moving to competency-based, mastery-based teaching and learning was so important and critical to the alternative education program in Stanford to really bring us to the next level and for success for all. It was necessary for teachers as well as students. I have been an educator for almost 30 years now. Prior to this position, I was, an elementary school teacher. I was a high school teacher, assistant principal, and director of PD for previous districts. So this is my latest position with Stamford Public Schools, and really happy to be here and very happy to have moved our program. And I can't wait to share it all with y'all.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Dr. Green. And I will introduce Superintendent Jesse Harper from Arkport Central School District in Arkport, New York. We are so excited to have him with us today. We worked with him and his team on creating a strategic plan simultaneously as we created a graduate profile that he will talk more about today. But Jesse has been a teacher, a school leader, and now a superintendent in Arkport, and derives from a science background. So Jesse, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I won't take too much time because we'll get to the details. This is my 18th year, and I've been fortunate enough to work all 18 years in the same district. First as a teacher, then as a principal, and now a superintendent. So a lot of the work that I did with Education Elements is born from all the experiences and kind of the stop-start work of any school district. And I'm really excited to share what we've done, because it really is not the culmination, because we still have to work and we still have to implement, but I'm really feel good about the place we're in after our work with Education Elements on starting to define what we really care about for our students and where we want them to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse. So before we get started, let's talk about how we think about a graduate profile. And so we really use the definition from the book Street Data. If you have not read, highly recommend that book. And they, in their book, define the graduate profile as an accessible, succinct description of what every graduate must know, understand, and be able to do. And something that they emphasize and that we emphasize in our process, and that you'll hear from our leaders who are with us today, is that oftentimes when you hear graduate profile, you think, oh, graduate and high school students. But we offer that we want to expand that to all students. And these are things that we should be thinking about from pre-K to senior year. And so really thinking about how we can apply these concepts and seek alignment across building to building all through a student's experience in your district. And so that'll be something that we'll be thinking about today as well.
And something else we just wanted to clarify before we dive in is really the difference between a graduate profile and a learner profile. As Marisa mentioned, there's a lot of terminology that's thrown around when we're talking about developing a graduate profile, but just for the purposes of our conversation today, we're going to refer to the graduate profile as the set of outcomes of an educational experience for a student. And again, as Marisa mentioned, we're not just talking about high school seniors, we're talking about all learners throughout the K-12 spectrum, or pre-K to 12 spectrum, I guess. So when we're talking about that graduate profile, we're asking the question about what knowledge, skills, and abilities will students walk away with when they have finished that educational experience. Now, when we think about a learner profile, that's something that's really carried with the learner throughout their journey and really focuses on the process of learning itself. So when we're thinking about learner profiles, we're asking the question, how might we ensure that we're providing the necessary supports to each learner so that they can actually live out that graduate profile? So we're thinking about, we're gathering contextual information about those learners. We're understanding how they learn best, things that they particularly like, things that they don't like, how they engage in the learning process. So both of these things definitely work together to achieve those outcomes, but for the purposes of today, we're really going to talk about establishing those outcomes ahead, kind of forthright, so that the learner profile can be utilized to get students to live out those outcomes upon graduation. So I'll toss it over to Marisa, and we're going to dig in a little bit and provide a high-level overview of the work that we've done with our two wonderful guests here. And kind of take you through that process before we dig in a little bit and learn more about each one.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Arkport, and Jesse, I'll have you jump in a minute, but just want to, again, give a high level overview of kind of what our process looked like. So in Arkport, we talked about how originally how we phrased it was Portrait of a Graduate. We eventually landed on Journey of a Learner. So that's what we're referring to. Their graduate profile is called Journey of a Learner. And this is kind of a little bit of our evolution. So we first started with community engagement. At Education Elements, we really think community engagement is really important, really no matter what you're doing, but specifically for building strategic plans and graduate profiles. And so this came directly from students and families and community members. And so this is kind of, you'll see kind of some top attributes that we started with, and we've started to whittle that down, and there were many iterations of that. Once we kind of pared down, we started to brainstorm creatively around what this means, and we did a fun visual activity here, and then we also engaged in a few protocols to think about how is this going to look, how is this not going to look within Arkport, and specifically for our students and also for the adults. And then once again, many iterations of taking this back to the community and having many conversations with many different people and pulse checking, we kind of landed on these 6. And then we started to break down, what does that mean per grade band? We did grade bands that we also eventually put in the strategic plan. And so we started to think about, how can we make this student friendly, specific to these grade levels? And so eventually you'll see our final product here, which is in the Arkport strategic plan. And so you'll see the 6 that they landed on here. Thank you, Jesse. Oh, wow, look, I haven't seen it in print. It looks so great in print. But so proud of this plan, and Jesse and his team created such a beautiful product. And it's one of my favorite plans to talk about, because I think also the design is really fun. And we have also a screenshot here from the plan that we will link later in our follow-up notes. And you can see how it's broken down by grade level. So Jesse, anything to add high level here about the process or how that felt or looked?
Well, I got to say that Education Elements came along at the perfect time. For any of us in education and administration, the idea of mission and vision is drilled into us at every level. And I've always struggled with mission and vision. And there's many different definitions, depending on where do you go to school. And earlier this year, I was having this conversation with another faculty member about, what do we really want our kids to graduate with? What are the traits that set them up for success? And it all clicked together at the same time. So we do not have a mission and vision anymore. We have our journey of a learner, because traditional definition of mission, right? Why do we show up every day? We show up every day to educate our students, not on content. I know some people don't buy into that. We show up to make sure that we can work with our students on these skills. Now we do that through our content. So that's our mission. Traditional definition of vision. Where do we want our students to be in the future? Well, if they have these, they're going to be okay. So it really clicked into place of, this is why we show up and this is what we hope we can do for our students. And the last thing I'll say is Marisa was very patient with me. I am not just a whole student educator, I am a whole, if you're in this building, educator. And so what we did and what really made sense for us is that we went for Journey of a Learner because we are all learners within our district. And as faculty and staff members, we have to practice and show and work on these traits because our students watch us. And if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. So this really became the mission and vision for all of us within this district. And it's only through that work with Education Elements that really started to get focused. So I'm excited about it. This is 18 years of work that started clicking into place all of a sudden. So I'm excited about it.
Thanks, Jesse. We're also excited, and we will dive more into the details in a minute. So I'm going to pass it over to Drew to talk about Stamford.
Yeah, I'll talk a little high level about our process here. And Laura, I'll give you the chance to jump in and correct me if I got anything wrong afterwards. When we started this process back, I think it was September 2020, so very peak COVID. We were engaging in this process obviously virtually. It really coming about it from the lens of shifting to more of a competency-based model for Anchor. And we started the process pretty similarly to how Marisa outlined the Arkport process started. We started to ask the group of teachers that was with us, what are the things that you really think are important for learners to walk away with upon graduating from Anchor? And Laura, when I pass it to you in a minute, I'd love for you to provide a little bit more context about Anchor and just what a unique learning environment and setting it is. And I think that it was particularly valuable for us to go about this process because of the unique circumstances of the learners that attend Anchor and use that as such a valuable place to learn and kind of participate in the learning community. So after we did that brainstorming process, we sort of normed on what are those common themes that were coming up. And then we got a prototype together and sort of tested our assumptions and asked the school community, you know, what do you think about this? Do these things kind of resonate with you all? How are students reacting to this? How are teachers reacting to this? How are greater members of the school community reacting to our graduate profile? And what we came up with was what's on the next slide here. Similar to Arkport, again, we've got 6 kind of graduate level competencies that range from collaboration to critical thinking, problem solving, building empathy as a member of society, leadership, managing knowledge, all kinds of good stuff. But we knew that just having a graduate profile and sticking it up on the wall was not enough. So we then started to think about, you know, how do we unpack this graduate profile and make it live out in the day-to-day student experience? So we also, I didn't put this in the slides, but we also talked about how this is going to translate to kind of educators living these qualities out. So another connection over to what Jesse mentioned in Arkport. But from the student experience, what we started to do is think about, you know, within each of these competencies, there are probably some underlying and supporting skills that need to be outlined in order for students to actually achieve mastery over those things. So if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see our process for how that went down. We started to prioritize those graduate level competencies. Which ones did we want to unpack first? We then sort of broke them down, as I was mentioning, into supporting competencies. So what does it mean to be a collaborative contributor? It means adding my positive self-worth. It means celebrating others. And it means creating an empowering community. So from there, we then kind of broke that down into building out proficiency scales. So in theory, and what's actually happening in practice actually, is that teachers are going to be taking these proficiency scales and using those to build performance assessments in order to give students active and project-based learning opportunities to live these out and demonstrate competency or mastery over each of these graduate level competencies. So the work is still very much in process, very much in progress, and I'll let Laura kind of take it from here, add any additional context about Anchor and the process so far before we start to ask y'all some more in-depth questions. So Laura?
Thank you, Drew. Yes, so like Jesse was saying, Education Elements did come at a great time for Anchor as well. And Anchor is an alternative ed program. We are a very large urban district, and we have one alternative ed program, and that's Anchor. Numbers increase almost double throughout the school year. For us, it was, you know, before I started, there was more of a tutoring one-on-one, and then now we have become a school. So an infrastructure, very strong infrastructure, was so essential for everyone inside the school, all the staff, of course, the students, but also all the stakeholders. So everything was done in isolation. And we know that feeling where everything is done in isolation, it just really is a breakdown in the school climate. So I noticed when I started this position that a lot of our teachers really needed a lot of PD, which is a mindset change. They were doing more of the traditional teaching and learning, and you know, to their credit, that's what they've always done, and never was there an opportunity or a need to change that was presented to them. So that was going to be my role. And along with that, building the school climate and school community. And that meant having to take away all of these structures that were working in isolation. So when I had met initially with Education Elements, they understood right away. I did not have to go through a whole explanation, and that was wonderful. And we came up with, you know, how to best engage our students while also coming up with a very strong teaching and learning infrastructure. And, you know, it came down to two things. Well, it came down to, we moved to mastery-based teaching and learning, which then brought the portrait of a graduate. The portrait of a graduate is now like our foundation for our instructional vision. As Drew was saying, you know, all the work, it was a lot of work, and, you know, not everyone's on board like anything else. But now we're starting to see the benefit, and we're able to actually use this. We have a card deck with the slide that you're looking at right now are physical cards that every teacher has, and the kids see them too. And no matter what a teacher is teaching, one of these cards can be identified in the lesson. So the kids are seeing a greater purpose for why they're there. And, you know, going back to what Jesse said about the mission, you know, why do we show up every day? Well, now we have not only these manipulatives, but an end result that the students, the staff, and everyone can see, stakeholders. So what's wonderful about this is it just puts it all together. You know, you can have a mission, you can have a vision. No one knows what a mission and a vision is. I mean, if you were to just, I shouldn't say no one knows, but even, you know, I've gone around my staff before COVID, and what's the district's mission? The school didn't even have a vision and a mission. So this is an incredible framework. It is an incredible tool. It actually elevates the stakeholders and the purpose of Anchor. So, you know, I'm really curious to see what kind of questions you have and to answer them, because you know, like Jesse was saying, and I like how he said, like journey of a learner, you don't need like a vision and mission, even though we have it all, but like, this is the foundation. We call this the anchor, even though we're called Anchor. This is our anchor to everything we do. So it's a working document and everyone can speak to it.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing that high-level overview. And Dr. Green, the cards sound really fun. I love that idea. I'm going to stop sharing my screen actually so that we can see each other better. And then I'll put in the chat our first question, which I know you both have already touched on a little bit, is just why did you decide to create a graduate profile in your district? So Jesse, let's start with you.
It was clear and it was easy to implement. So thinking about, we've all sat through discussions over the last 5 years about future ready abilities in our students and how jobs aren't even created yet that our kids are going to graduate and have. And you look back at it and it's just these attributes are what our journey of a learner, are what companies are looking for right now. And so we really wanted to focus on and clarify our purpose day to day in our district. And when you look at our attributes, or you look at Laura's attributes, I have not found a situation yet where we can't link back to those attributes, regardless of the content, regardless of the activity. I was just having a conversation yesterday about one of my colleagues, and her daughter is in an advanced math class, and it's hard. The student is used to getting 95s and 100s, and the student is getting 85s now. And so you go back to resiliency and courage. Those are the things that we want our students to graduate with. And shorten it up. I'm sorry, I'm going to shorten my answer here. Clarity is why we did it. And that was the sole purpose, about getting to the point and being able to apply it on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks, Jesse. I think it's really important to highlight how this is really relevant to kids and adults in Arkport and in your community, that we can make those connections across the board. And that's really helpful that, you know, everyone's being held to those expectations and we're defining what those means for everyone. Dr. Green, how about you all? Why did you decide to embark on this journey?
Anchor needed a greater purpose for teachers to go every day and students to go every day beyond just passing a class. You know, you weren't going to school just to pass math. and then just to pass US history or whatever it is that they have. It had to be a greater purpose for going to school, and teachers needed a greater purpose to get out of their isolated room of being able to just do what they had to do. So that's why we did it. We needed to really have a greater purpose for kids to come every day and for teachers to be more excited to come every day. I have to say that we just had open house last Thursday. Our open house has never been successful. You can count on one hand those that show up. Now you have to remember, we're a very small school and we're alternative ed. So, you know, that's just common anyway. We had over 80% participation of parents. That's never happened before. And I do, you know, I do link what we've done to that, because the excitement is there and the purpose has just been magnified. So that's why we did it. We needed a greater purpose that was meaningful to everyone.
That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that, Laura. And Jesse too, thank you for that response. And if I'm taking anything from what you shared so far, just those ideas of purpose and clarity are such valuable and tangible benefits to establishing a graduate profile, to have that North Star, something that everyone is striving towards and everyone can connect to really support the learning experience. So thank you for sharing that. Marisa and I talked a little bit about the process of developing your respective graduate profiles, but I'd love for you to elaborate on it a little more. So you can kind of take this any way you want, but some suggestions for some follow-up questions for that process are sort of like, did you run into any roadblocks as you were developing the graduate profile? What were sort of the highlights and lowlights of that process? And if you were to give advice to another district who was thinking about embarking on this journey themselves, what advice might you give them? So a number of different ways that you could take this, but would love to unpack that process a little bit more. And Jesse, we can start with you again. Talk us through the journey of a learner.
So I'm going to look at the question. What roadblocks, if any? Everybody's got an opinion. That's the roadblock. And taking the time to actually work with your constituent groups in a meaningful way. It's not a short process. It's not an overly long process either, but this is not something you do in a couple of weeks or a month. And so that was the roadblock, really getting the right group of people. We got feedback from hundreds and hundreds of people, students, faculty, staff, parents, but getting the right group of people together that are going to be excited, engage in the process to sift through all that information. So that was the biggest roadblock for us. But I guess it wasn't a roadblock. We knew it was going to happen. So, but that was probably going through the iterations of what's this mean? What's that mean? What about this word? What about that word?
Jesse, how long did the process take you?
It seemed really short. So Marisa is gonna jump in. It was 6 months.
Yeah, a little long. Well, a little longer. It's hard to say because we simultaneously built, the strategic plan with the graduate profile side by side, and so that process took 6 to 8 months. And so within that, kind of we were intertwining touch points. But I would say, if you're doing this in a very thoughtful manner, it's going to take you, months. And I think to Jesse's point around the community engagement also is, and we'll put a resource in after we're done around some tips to consider when you're building one. But one of this is specifically around community engagement and the different forms in which you can do that. And so, Jesse, if you remember, we did focus groups, right, where we, sat down with groups of students, group of educators, and asked them questions and then synthesize that data. We also, had informal conversations that folks led, and, leveraging what relationships they had. So if a teacher had a specific, really strong relationship with a, particular family or a group, or was a coach and coached kids or whatever they were we encourage them to leverage those relationships and have those informal conversations as well as having formal feedback as well. And so I think that's something part of the process also also that we really emphasize and that we call kind of like socializing ideas. Because I think oftentimes in these processes, we are afraid to get feedback often or early on in the process because we don't feel like everything's clean and neat and polished, and we want to wait until that happens. And so at Education Elements, we really encourage to get messy in the process, and it's okay to not have, you know, a final product to get feedback on. And we actually think it's better and easier if you do that throughout the process. And so sometimes folks struggle with that, but Arkport did a really great job of adapting to that and gathering a lot of
help. Nobody in education likes a messy product. We all want to be good and perfect because we were all probably pretty good students at some point, and that's why we got into education. So that was hard. And the advice, I guess I'll go back to something Laura said about have a reason to do it. And so because it's such a big undertaking, like what's the impetus behind it? Ours was we were preparing for coming out the other side of the pandemic, and we did so much to support, help, and get our students through this that it was like, okay, we're on the other side of it. And I don't say the new normal or whatever it is, wherever we are after the pandemic, we have to think about how do we get back to those traits that we're looking for and how do we support our students. So that was our reason for doing it.
Laura, I'm glad that the term messy process came up, because I know that you had kind of talked a little bit about the challenges of generating buy-in among staff throughout this process. So I'd love to ask you the same questions. What are some of those roadblocks that y'all ran into at Anchor? And what's some advice that you might give to somebody who wants to start on developing their own portrait of a grad?
So as I said earlier, our program was a program which has now turned into a school, but you know, we had people that were teachers that were very set in their ways. And that is in no way talking badly about them, you know, like that was what they did, what was acceptable. So when we knew we had to make changes and increase student engagement, that's when we went to Education Elements for mastery-based learning, to really make the shift into mastery-based learning with our program. So no one thought anything was wrong. And so why are we doing this change? Or is it just one more thing that's going to go away? So that was the biggest roadblock. I knew just from all my past experiences, you're always going to be, you know, having people at both ends of the spectrum, those that are like gung-ho, yes, I can't wait, and those are just like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to show up, I'm not going to do anything. And so you just want those baby steps. But like that was pretty much the biggest roadblock, the questioning, which we love the questioning, but those questions were mostly, you know, why do we have to do this? Like, this is just why. So it wasn't, you know, and we would answer them. So, and moving to competency mastery-based teaching and learning was our first step. And that was not a short 6-month to 9-month step. So, you know, you're either all in, well, everybody had to be all in, but I let those naysayers kind of just, okay, you can stay as a naysayer. And eventually, you know, they did move up. So then once we got to the portrait of a graduate, it was a lot more participation, let's say. And now we're just seeing the greater amount of participation because, like I said, that card deck is what's being used every day. So now it's actually what they initially was like, oh, this is just one more thing that's going to go away, to, wow, we're using this every day and this is becoming who we are. So the biggest roadblock with anything that is new, especially I find in education, is just really getting, you know, just plowing through, even with our naysayers, to the end. And, you know, it'll all come out in, you know, in the end. Even the biggest naysayers now are just like, they're smiling and they're happy. And So the roadblock was, it's a mindset change. So with that comes that resistance. So the initial resistance, I say, was the biggest roadblock.
Yeah, and I'll ask you the same question too. How long has this process in your mind taken? Or when did it kind of begin? When did it start to kind of formulate in your mind? Up until this point? Because we started working in September 2020, but I'm sure that this is something that you were thinking about before then.
Yeah, like I said, I came into this role 2 years before that. So the first year I did a lot of getting used to the new district, finding out what the ins and outs and the expectations, and which was very different. And then, coming up with a plan, we have to come up with a plan. This is not okay the way it is. So, and then by then it was time to call in for help.
Reinforcements, and looks like we've got a super sleuth joining us. Kim has found the instructional look-fors, which is something that actually came from the graduate profile building process. So Maurice is going to ask the next question, but I think Dr. Green, if you want to touch on that in terms of how the graduate profile is kind of living out in the day-to-day anchor experience, I would love to hear that from you in a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about kind of the why and the how, and so thinking naturally around kind of the what. So we have this graduate profile. So what? So what does that mean, and what are we doing with it? And what are the plans to do with it, and how to engage it? And I know again we've touched on this a little bit, but question to both of you around. So now that you've built this, you've spent all this time talking about it and building this framework and socializing it with your communities. Now what? What are we doing with it now? And Dr. Green, you want to start?
Sure. So, like I said, we have our card deck, so that helps with the teachers to be sure that their lessons do align with one of the competencies, and specifically one of the supporting competencies. Students see that, students know that. The other thing is, as I said earlier, what was bothering me a great deal when I started was everything was in isolation, and that was what was like just getting under my skin every day. So with this, to bring this, so this is who we are, this is what we do, and everything falls into this. We have our instructional look-fors. The teachers actually circle what look-for they want to concentrate on. And then that's what I have when I go in, so they know, I'm going in there and I'm looking for, and I'm helping support them in improving those look-fors. It's not all of them. The teachers really do begin with selecting which one they want. And this year we are just going to concentrate on student engagement. So we're all doing that, and we're using the instructional look-fors for that. We're using the card deck for that. So it's, like I said, now there's nothing in isolation, and everyone is helping each other as well. So we're able to do it all, the mastery based is now we're all working together to come up, with lessons and projects that are connected amongst the content areas, as well as our instructional look-fors and our card decks, which is Portrait of a Graduate. So that's how we're using it. We're actually using it every day.
That's awesome. I love that alignment through all those different tools. Jesse, how about you?
Two ways. The first is the long term. I've worked in the district for 18 years. I'm patient. So it is building it into our everyday vocabulary, those traits, and starting the process of everything references back to those learning traits. So if we want to do something, you want to go on a field trip, what's going on? How does it go back? We just started, giving you a mini example, we just started for the first time last year, our elementary drama program. And it's got 40 kids in it. It's huge, but going to that is courage and resilience. And, so having people focus on not only are we going to do something new, how does it focus on where are we going with these traits? Also, what have we always done? And can we tie it back to these traits? I love tradition, but tradition has to have a reason. So really that slow build of here's the verbalization of what we're trying to do. So now let's be purposeful in tying things back to it. And that's a long term. That is, I am patient enough to, people kind of roll their eyes at me when I bring up Journey of a Learner because it's so new, but then the people who click into it and get it, like this is the language I need to speak in, this is how I need to frame things, they get how that smooths things over. So it's the long term. And in the short term, we really identified a project that we wanted to do this year that was focused on each of the traits. We have an after school program, which is amazing. It is not just study halls, but it's clubs and activities. And so one of the things, like for communication, we are going to have our students do, I quote, Yelp reviews for the activities so that they start to learn, if you really love the activity, how do you get that across? And your other students will see it. If you didn't like the activity, how do you say that in a respectful and constructive manner? So you don't just become a troll later on in life on the internet. So long-term, building it in, short-term, giving people examples of how we're putting these things in place.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jesse. And I also think that the excitement that you and your team also have, demonstrated and shown in your community has been really helpful as well, because oftentimes, we've all been in places where we have a district initiative or we have a new something, and the excitement fades because it fades. And so I really appreciate that we are still continuing to put this front and center and Journey of Learner so that, everyone is going to be able to say how it applies to them. And we're going to continue to weave this into everything we do. So thinking about, continuing that involvement, what are ways in which you think that you can continue to involve the school community and your greater community, the more that you use this and develop it, and the ways that you currently are? Question for both of you.
It goes back to it. I'll reference back to how this is the language for us all, faculty, staff, students, parents, that this is how we're going to talk about things. And so continuing to engage when we have talks with parents about struggles the students having, let's go back to those attributes. What are we talking about? Giving the example of the student who's struggling in advanced math, that might be part of it. That, like, the struggle is good. So if you want the 100, we can move the math class to an easier class, or having the struggle, or how is an interaction between faculty and staff, how is that respectful? So really re-engaging every day in all of our conversations with all of our community members, how are we referring back to those attributes? And I go to the faculty and staff that have gotten it, they see how it smooths away. And then that's also our accountability piece for holding our community members responsible, but they also get to do the reverse for us. Are we living these attributes? Are we holding our students to those standards?
So I can piggyback on that. One thing that we did here at Anchor, and we're just putting it into place, is we did Portrait of an Educator. And the Portrait of an Educator has the same attribute as Portrait of a Graduate. So it's just what it looks like for an educator. And so, and what we were very fortunate to be able to do is actually do a crosswalk on Connecticut's standards for teachers. So, which is pages and pages long of competencies in the rubric. And we were able to align the portraits of an educator with those attributes and just kind of fit it all in. So it ends up being like 2 pages. So that's one way we're moving forward with that. I haven't rolled it out with my staff yet. This will be the first year, but I think that they're going to like it because it's so much less to absorb and work through. So that is one way we're going to continue doing that. I absolutely love what Jesse was saying, and I might have to steal it, Jesse, about really making the terminology and the language like in our conversations more. And the third way is my next thought is to take this and have the students start building their own portfolio of these attributes, because these attributes is something they can take with them. They can speak to them. And it won't be just as a resume or going into an interview. They can actually speak to these attributes and how they have shown these attributes. So that's how I would like to bring it moving forward. It's, you know, it's not an overnight thing. I'm working to see how we can figure out how to create a portfolio without it looking, you know, complicated. But yeah, that's how we're moving forward with it.
Thanks for
Marisa,
sharing that, Laura.
Drew, I got one more example. I always like, I kind of try to think about the people who are watching this. I always love real world examples. So I just remembered another one. New York State has started a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative, DEI, and it's many different names across many different states. We are mandated to do things. We are mandated to put things in place. So a real world example, and that is not an easy conversation, depending on who you're talking to, where you're talking, all of those different things. So journey of a learner is the base of our conversations. Respect, responsibility, communication, critical thinking. And so it's also, that is what we are doing literally right now is using that to frame the conversations. You know, my board was very good about, there's no communication back and forth. It's just talking at arguing, right? And so going to journey of a learner, that is the expectation if people want to be part of this conversation. So that's just a real world example of where it's, because you can't argue. Nobody's going to argue critical thinking and communication are bad. So you get them. You know it's good. So let's okay, then let's see it. So that's just, it's something I'm excited about right now.
Nice, thanks for sharing that, Jesse. Any more real world examples from you, Laura? I love how, well, you touched on this. It's the graduate profile is really the anchor of a lot of other decisions and kind of processes that you're looking to roll out. So when we started this journey with you all, it was very much instructional focused, but then developing the graduate profile kind of shed a light on some of the needs that we needed to develop with educators on instruction. So we kind of went about it that way. We developed that portion of an educator. That turned into the instructional look-forwards. Now we're back to the graduate profile, unpacking the competencies and developing performance-based assessment. So it's not necessarily a linear journey. There's a lot of things that kind of come up as needs arise, but what doesn't change is that graduate profile. That's the thing that really stands true and strong throughout the process and can be that, as I said earlier, that North Star that all initiatives are pointing towards. We're getting close to wrapping up here. So I just wanted to give you, Laura and Jesse, the opportunity to share anything else that we didn't ask you about that you're particularly excited about. The floor is yours for some closing thought.
So I have to say that in almost 30 years of education, this has been probably one of the most meaningful additions that we've made. I've been in other districts, wonderful, wonderful years teaching and being an administrator. But this just really makes sense, pulls it all together and brings a greater purpose. I want to continue to be here saying this if I thought otherwise. We all know in education, things come and go. You have to do this and this initiative and that. This is something that just is a glue and can be relatable to everything, to all the internal and external stakeholders. So I really can't say enough about it after all my years of experience.
Thanks, Laura. Jesse, any closing thoughts from you?
Laura said it perfect. I don't have to repeat it. Well done.
That's what Laura does. Well, thanks to you both. I just want to extend probably the first note of appreciation for joining us today. It's been so valuable for me to learn from you, Jesse, and also from you, Laura. Even though I was with you in the trenches for most of this journey, it's always great to reflect back and kind of see how the Portrait of a Graduate has evolved and how it continues to inform your work. So we're going to share the slide deck in just a couple minutes. You'll have there will be a bit.ly so you can reference that if you are not watching this live. But we've got a couple different resources related to building the graduate profile. Great blog that Maritha actually just authored this week, I think. 5 tips for building a graduate profile. We definitely want you to check that out, as well as some resources that are associated with, both strategic planning and personalized learning. As you hopefully gathered from our conversation, the graduate profile can really be a foundation for a number of different other initiatives that might be happening in your district. So if strategic planning is something that is important to you, that you want to kind of embark on that journey, the graduate profile can be a good way to start that process. And like Marisa was saying, it can really run in tandem with the strategic planning journey, if that's how you so choose to carry that out. And then also instructionally, the Portrait of a Graduate can be a really strong foundation for building a competency or mastery-based learning program and making the learning experience more student-centered. So there will be some resources in the slide deck that you can click into related to those 2 topics as well. And then we also want to just share that our blog, as we mentioned, is full of lots of great resources, tips, and just general know-how about solving some of the pressing challenges that you are likely facing in your district. So we invite you to subscribe to our blog, learn more about what's going on in our minds and how we are helping districts across the country to solve complex challenges. And if you want more webinars from Ed Elements, we have plenty coming up. Throughout November, we are sort of embarking on this series of engaging and motivating. You can register for remaining webinars in the series at the link that you can see on the screen. And then if you are sick of virtual events and you want to go to something in person and see people in 3D instead of 2D, we are hosting an immersive institute on recruiting and retaining our teacher workforce, one of the most pressing challenges in K-12 education right now. If you want to head down to sunny Orlando from November 30th to December 1st, that will be a really stellar experience for you to dive into that topic with educators from across the country to think about how we can better recruit and retain our teachers. And last but not least, we just want to say thank you again. You can see our slide deck link right there, bit.ly/gradprofile22. You can follow us on social media on the right-hand side there and also access our blog. So Marisa, I'll turn it back over to you to close us out.
Yeah, I just want to echo Drew's sentiments. Lots of gratitude to Jesse and Dr. Green for joining us today. And it was such a pleasure to work with both of their districts. And thanks to everyone for joining us. We'll be around for a few minutes if you have any questions. But thanks again so much. And please subscribe to our blog for all those free resources and reach out with any questions and we can put you in touch with the right folks. But thank you so much and hope you enjoy the rest of your week.